I don't remember the exact day he stopped calling. I just remember noticing the quiet. At first, I thought the phone was acting up. Low signal, maybe. Or one of those days when nothing seems to come through. So I checked it. Once. Then again. Holding it a little closer than usual. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing blinking to explain the silence. That was the strange part. There was no ending. No last conversation that felt final. No goodbye to hold on to. Just nothing. I told myself it was normal. People get busy. Days slip by. I'd wait. That's what I did best back then. Wait. I kept the phone on the table beside my chair. Screen facing up. Volume turned just loud enough. Every small sound made me look. Every vibration in the house made my heart lift for a second. But the name never appeared. I don't know why I was so sure he would call again. I just was. Maybe because he always had before. Or maybe because silence feels temporary when you don't want it to be permanent. The evenings were the hardest. That was when he used to call. After dinner. When the house settled down. And the day had finished asking things from us. I'd sit there. Lights dimmed. Phone within reach. Pretending I wasn't waiting. Time passed differently then. Slow in the wrong places. Fast where I wanted it to stop. At some point, I realized I was listening more to the room than the phone. To the hum of the refrigerator. The ticking clock. The sounds that fill space when voices don't. That's when it hit me. He hadn't said he was leaving. He hadn't said anything at all. He just never called again. And somehow, that was harder to understand than any goodbye. I don't remember the last thing we talked about. And that's what bothers me most. It wasn't an argument. Or a goodbye. Or anything important enough to remember. It was just ordinary. A few words. A pause. A promise to talk again. He said he'd call. Not in a serious way. Not like something was ending. Just casually. Like people do when they assume there will always be another time. I remember holding the phone for a moment after the call ended. Listening to the quiet that follows a click. The house felt the same. The clock kept ticking. Nothing had changed. Except something had. At first, I didn't notice it. The next day came and went. And I thought, maybe he's busy. That happens. The day after that, I checked the phone a little more often. Not constantly. Just enough to pretend I wasn't waiting. I told myself I wasn't expecting anything. But every sound, every vibration, every small buzz made my heart lift just a little. Funny how hope does that. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles in quietly. By the third day, I had memorized the silence. No missed calls. No messages. Just my own name sitting alone in the contact list. I didn't delete it. That felt too final. Instead, I placed the phone face up on the table each night. As if it needed to see me waiting. As if that might remind it what to do. I went to bed thinking. Tomorrow. I woke up thinking. Maybe today. Days passed like that. Softly. Without urgency. Without answers. And somewhere in that quiet stretch of time, without any announcement at all, he stopped calling. And I was left with something heavier than silence. I was left with the space where a voice used to be. At first, I made excuses for him. People get busy. Life gets in the way. Phones die. Days blur together. I've lived long enough to know that. So I waited. Not in a dramatic way. Not counting hours or staring at the screen. Just aware. Like you're aware of a chair that's missing from a room. You don't trip over the space. But you feel it every time you pass by. I told myself, if it mattered, he'd call. That thought brought comfort at first. Then it began to sting. Because if it mattered, and he didn't call, what did that say? I replayed our last conversation. Slowly. Not searching for mistakes. Just listening for signs. Was I tired? Was he distracted? Did I miss something in his voice? Or was this how it was always meant to end? Quietly. Without ceremony. Without closure. The strange thing is, I wasn't angry. Anger needs energy. This felt softer. Heavier. Like holding a coat you don't need anymore, but don't know where to put. I kept the phone nearby. Not clutched. Not guarded. Just close enough. At night, I placed it on the bedside table. Face up. Like a small window. I didn't check it when I woke up. I didn't want disappointment to be the first thing I felt. But later, when the light had settled into the room, I would look. Every time. And every time, it looked back at me unchanged. No missed calls. No blinking lights. Just time. Passing. I began to understand something then. Not everything that ends announces itself. Some things simply stop arriving. And you're left wondering. When you crossed the line between waiting and being forgotten. I remembered when his calls used to come. Without warning. Mid-afternoon. Late evenings. Sometimes just to say nothing important. Those were the best ones. The kind where silence was allowed. Where you could hear someone breathing. On the other end. Proof they were there. Proof you were too. We didn't talk every day. We never promised we would. But there was a rhythm to it. An understanding. Like two clocks in different rooms. Somehow keeping the same time. That's why the quiet felt wrong. Not loud enough to alarm anyone else. Just off. Like a picture hanging slightly crooked. That only you notice. I wondered if he expected me to call. That thought lingered. Pride is a strange thing. It tells you you're protecting yourself. Sometimes it's just fear. Wearing better clothes. I picked up the phone once. held it, then set it down again. The screen went dark. So did the moment. I told myself, if he wanted to talk, he would. That belief had carried me through many years. But age has a way of questioning the rules you once trusted. I thought about the last thing he said. Nothing dramatic. Just, "I'll call you." Not a promise. Not a goodbye. Just a sentence left open. Those are the ones that echo. Days passed. I stayed busy. Cooked. Walked. Slept. Life did not pause with me. It rarely does. But underneath it all, something kept listening, waiting for a sound that never came. And slowly, without deciding to, I began to prepare myself for the idea that this silence might be the answer. I didn't tell anyone about it. There didn't seem to be a reason. How do you explain something that didn't happen? There was no argument, no harsh word, nothing to point to. Just absence. And absence is difficult to describe. People understand events. They struggle with gaps. I checked the phone less after that. Not because I stopped caring, but because hope gets tired before the heart does. Morning light came through the window. Evenings settled softly. The days kept their shape. Only one thing was missing. I caught myself rehearsing conversations. Things I would say if the phone rang. Ordinary things. The weather. A memory. Something I'd read. Nothing urgent. Just proof we still existed in each other's lives. Sometimes I wondered if I'd imagined the closeness, if it had meant more to me than it ever did to him. That thought arrived quietly. It didn't accuse. It simply sat there. I let it. Age teaches you. Not every question needs an answer. Some just need space. I told myself, people drift. Lives change. Silence doesn't always mean loss. But deep down, I knew this one was different. Because it wasn't drifting. It was stopping. And stopping leaves a heavier mark. By the end of that week, I stopped expecting the sound. That doesn't mean I stopped listening. Some habits stay long after their purpose is gone. I carried the phone with me from room to room. Not for calls. Just for the comfort of its weight. As if holding it might keep the past from slipping too far away. I didn't mark the day he stopped calling. There was no reason to. Nothing official had ended. Life rarely announces its exits. It just leaves doors half open. I went on with my routines. Coffee in the same mug. Shoes by the door. Lights off in rooms I wasn't using. Familiar things became anchors. They asked nothing of me. At night, the house sounded louder. Not noisy. Just honest. Pipes ticking. Floorboard settling. The quiet had texture. I slept with the phone on the nightstand, face down. Not dramatic, just close. Sometimes I woke up thinking I'd missed it. A vibration, a sound, but it was always the same. Morning. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. Anger needs an object. This was shapeless. I felt something closer. To acceptance. Not peace. Just recognition. Some connections fade without permission, and chasing explanations only deepens the silence. I stopped replaying our last conversation, stopped checking dates, stopped wondering what I should have said. What's done doesn't echo forever, unless we invite it. Instead, I focused on what remained. Breath, time, space. Those things are reliable. They stay. By the end of the week, I understood something simple. He hadn't disappeared. The moment had. And moments, once gone, don't return the same. I placed the phone back where it belonged. Not hidden, just settled. And for the first time, the quiet didn't feel like waiting. It felt like the beginning of something slower, something steadier, something mine. Time didn't fix anything. It softened the edges. That's different. Mornings arrived. Without announcements. Light through the curtains. The clock doing its quiet work. I noticed I was listening less. For the phone. Not because I'd stopped caring. Because habits loosen when they're not fed. I started walking more. Short walks. No destination. Just movement. The neighborhood felt unchanged. Same parked cars. Same trees. Different version of me. Sometimes I caught myself thinking of him mid-step. Not his face. Not his voice. Just the space he used to occupy. Like a chair that's been moved, but still remembered. There were no flashbacks. No sudden waves. Just small recognitions. A phrase he used. A way he paused before answering. Those details surfaced quietly. They didn't demand attention. They waited. I let them pass. Inside the house, I rearranged things. Nothing drastic. A lamp shifted. A photo turned face down. Not erased. Just rested. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing where things lived. Memory doesn't need the front row. It can sit somewhere safe. Out of the way. In the evenings, I cooked simpler meals. Things that didn't require timing. Soup. Toast. Food you can step away from. Food that doesn't mind waiting. That felt important. I realized I was learning how to live without punctuation. No check-ins. No follow-ups. Just sentences that end when they end. And somehow, That felt like breathing. Without holding it. Not relief. Just room. The phone still sat. In the same place. Kitchen counter. Right side. Face down. I hadn't moved it. That mattered. Not because I was waiting. But because I wasn't ready. To decide. Some nights. I noticed the silence. More clearly. Not loud. Not heavy. Just present. Like a room. After everyone leaves. I started sleeping lighter. Waking without alarms. Listening to the house. Settle back into itself. The refrigerator hum. Pipes cooling. Floorboards remembering footsteps. I used to think quiet meant empty. Now I knew better. Quiet holds shape. It has edges. It has weight. One afternoon, I found an old note. Tucked into a drawer. Just a name. And a number. Written in his handwriting. I didn't throw it away. Didn't keep it either. I placed it back. Different drawer. That felt honest. I realized something then. Waiting isn't always active. Sometimes it's just leaving space open. Not calling. Not checking. Not asking. Just allowing time to decide what remains. I stopped imagining explanations. No emergencies. No misunderstandings. No reasons. Those thoughts didn't help. They circled. Without landing. Instead, I focused on what was real. The chair by the window. The sound of traffic. Far enough away. The way evening light lingered longer these days. I understood. I wasn't being ignored. I was being released. Not deliberately. Not kindly. Just quietly. And maybe that was the hardest kind. There was a time, not long ago, when silence felt temporary. Like a pause between two sounds. Now it felt complete. Finished. I stopped checking the call log. Stopped replaying days. Stopped measuring time by absence. That shift was small. Almost unnoticeable. But it changed the weight of the hours. I began to remember him. Without reaching for the phone. That surprised me. Memories arrived intact. Not broken. Not urgent. Just present. A laugh. A sentence left unfinished. The way he said goodbye. Without realizing it. Those moments no longer asked to be corrected. They existed. That was enough. I noticed how often we confuse closure with explanation, as if answers soften loss. They don't. They just give it words. Some things end without permission, without ceremony, without noise. And learning to accept that takes longer than learning the truth. I realized I didn't miss the calls. I missed the certainty. The assumption that someone would be there. That belief fades slowly. Not all at once. One quiet adjustment at a time. That evening, I stood at the front door. Not waiting. Just standing. Hand on the knob. Feeling the cool metal. Understanding something simple. Life continues. Even when stories don't. And sometimes, the ending isn't the moment. Someone leaves. It's the moment. You stop expecting them back. The phone rang. The next afternoon. And for half a second, my body reacted. Before my mind did. Shoulders lifted. Breath caught. Hope. Automatic. Then I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I let it ring. Watched the vibration fade into silence. That felt important. Not dramatic. Just honest. I noticed how the room stayed calm. No rush to fill the quiet. No disappointment settling in. The world didn't tilt. It stayed level. That surprised me more than the silence ever had. Later, I made tea and sat at the table. Steam rising slowly. Light shifting across the wall. I thought about how often we mistake readiness for attachment. I hadn't been waiting. I had been available. Those are not the same. Waiting is heavy. Availability is open. One keeps you still. The other lets you move. I remembered how many times I'd held conversations that never happened. Practiced replies. Prepared forgiveness. No one asked for. All that effort spent on echoes. Now, the quiet felt earned. Like a room after guests leave. Nothing broken. Just empty. And emptiness isn't always loss. Sometimes it's space. That night, I slept without checking the phone. No last glance. No habit pulling at me. Just rest. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like something taken. It felt like something returned. Morning came. Without announcement. Light through the curtains. Birds somewhere nearby. No urgency. I lay still. Longer than usual. Not because I was tired. Because I didn't feel pushed to begin. That felt new. I reached for the phone. Out of habit. Then stopped. Left it where it was. The room felt wider. Without it. I made breakfast slowly. Toast brown just enough. Coffee poured carefully. Every small action given its own time. I realized how often sound fills our mornings. Radios. Notifications. Voices we don't really hear. Today, there was none of that. And somehow, it felt fuller. I sat by the window and watched the street. A man walking his dog. A delivery truck passing. Someone laughing. 2 houses down. Life continuing. Without invitation. I thought about how many calls shape our days. Some expected. Some hoped for. Some that change things. And some that never come. Not all unanswered calls are unfinished. Some are complete. In their silence, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt clarified, like dust settling after being stirred. I understood something then. Not sharply. Not all at once. Just quietly. That waiting is a choice. And so is letting go. One keeps you listening. The other lets you hear. I stood up, washed the cup, and placed it upside down to dry. A small ending. Clean. Enough. I didn't think about him for the rest of the morning. And that, more than anything, told me I was already moving on. There was a time when the phone rang differently. Not louder. Just closer. Back then, a ringing phone meant something. News. Laughter. Plans forming in real time. We didn't screen calls. We answered them. Sometimes too quickly. Sometimes with hope already in our voices. I remembered how he used to call. Without warning. Mid-afternoon. Late evening. Always casual. As if it hadn't taken courage. As if connection were effortless. Those calls never lasted long. But they stayed. Not because of what was said. Because of how they began. With recognition. With familiarity. With the simple comfort of being known. I used to lean against the counter while we talked, tracing lines in the wood with my finger, listening more than speaking, silence filling the spaces between words. Good silence, the kind that doesn't rush. I hadn't thought about that in years. Not directly. Memories don't always announce their return. They arrive sideways, triggered by nothing, or by everything. A tone, a pause, the absence of a sound. I realized then that voices don't leave all at once. They fade in pieces. A laugh first, then a phrase, then the way someone says your name. Some parts stay longer. Not because you hold them, because they belong to you now. And as I sat there, listening to the quiet of the house, I understood. He hadn't disappeared. He had become a memory. And memories, unlike calls, don't need answering. That afternoon, I opened a drawer I rarely used. Old receipts, a spare key, things kept just in case. At the bottom, my hand found something familiar. The phone he used to call from. Not a smartphone. An old one. Buttons worn smooth. Screen dark. I hadn't kept it. On purpose. It had simply stayed. Like many things do. I held it for a moment. Not expecting anything. Just acknowledging its weight. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Of course. Some silences are permanent. Still. My thumb hovered where his name used to appear. Memory filling the space where light once was. I thought about how objects carry sound, how they remember touch, even when they forget function. That phone had heard laughter, pauses, breathing on the other end. Now, it was quiet, not broken, finished. I placed it back in the drawer, carefully, as if returning it to sleep. Some things don't need closure. They need rest. I closed the drawer. The house felt unchanged. That mattered. Grief often announces itself. But acceptance is quiet. It doesn't arrive with explanation. It settles. Like dust. Like evening light. By the time the sun dipped lower, I realized something else. The memory hadn't hurt. It hadn't pulled. It had simply passed through. Like a visitor who knows when to leave. And when the room returned to stillness, I felt ready. Not for another call, but for whatever came next. Evening arrived. Without ceremony. Shadows stretched across the floor. The clock marked time. Softly. I noticed how different the hours feel when you stop counting them. Dinner was simple. Nothing planned. Nothing expected. I ate slowly. Not distracted. Just present. That used to feel unfamiliar. Now, it felt earned. I thought about how endings rarely announce themselves. They don't always arrive with final words. Sometimes they slip in quietly, between routines, between breaths. We spend so much time waiting for confirmation. A call, a message, an explanation. But life doesn't always offer those comforts. What it offers instead is continuity. Another evening. Another meal. Another night. I remembered how often I had checked the phone after sunset, as if darkness might carry answers. Now, the phone stayed where it was, unmoved, unconsulted. The quiet no longer felt like a question. It felt like a statement. I stepped outside. For a moment. The air was cooler. Streetlights warming one by one. Somewhere nearby, someone closed a door. That sound felt complete. I realized then that not all connections are meant to last. Some are meant to teach you how to listen. Others, how to let go. And some, how to be alone without feeling empty. I went back inside, locked the door, turned off the lights. And as I prepared for sleep, I noticed something unexpected. I wasn't waiting. I was resting. There is a difference. And once you learn it, you don't forget. Morning came. The same way it always does. Light finding edges. Sound returning to rooms. Nothing announced itself. And yet, something had shifted. I woke without reaching. No hand searching for a phone. No thought of missed calls. The silence had become neutral. Neither heavy, nor hopeful. Just there. I made tea. Watched steam rise. Waited for it to cool. Patience felt different now. Not like delay. Like choice. I realized how often waiting had shaped my days. Pauses filled with expectation. Moments measured by response. Now, time belonged to itself. I stepped outside. The street already awake. People moving forward. Without checking behind them. That felt important. Movement doesn't ask permission. It simply continues. I thought about the phrase. He never called again. How final it sounds. How heavy it feels. But endings don't erase what existed. They simply stop adding to it. What remains is memory. And memory changes shape. Some edges soften. Others lose weight. Until they fit. Without hurting. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel relieved. I felt clear. And clarity is quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't announce victory. It just stands. I returned home. Set the cup in the sink. Opened the window. The air moved through the room. Uninterrupted. Unconcerned. That's when I understood. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you stop asking for. And once you stop asking, life resumes. At its own pace. Life didn't restart. It simply kept going. And I stepped back into it. Without ceremony. There was no moment of decision. No vow to be stronger. No promise made to myself. Just small actions. Done without resistance. I began to notice things again. Not in search of meaning. But because they were there. The way sunlight lingered. On the floor longer than expected. The sound of a ceiling fan. Counting time softly. The comfort of routine. When it's no longer interrupted. Days stopped asking questions. They arrived complete. I answered emails. Watered plants. Folded clothes. Each task ordinary. Each one grounding. There was relief in the mundane. Nothing needed interpretation. Nothing hinted at absence. I wasn't filling space. I was occupying it. Evenings felt wider. Not empty. Just open. I would sit without distraction. No background noise. To avoid thought. Silence didn't pull at me anymore. It rested beside me. Like something familiar. I realized. Healing doesn't announce itself. It shows up as neutrality. As moments where nothing aches. As hours that pass without review. And when I noticed that, I didn't hold on to it. I let it be. Because peace doesn't like being examined. It prefers to be lived. It wasn't joy. Not yet. Just a quiet alignment. Like furniture finally placed where it belonged. I began to feel present. Without effort. Moments no longer slipped past. They stayed long enough to be noticed. A neighbor waved. I waved back. No story attached. No reminder triggered. Just a gesture. Passing between two lives. I started listening. Instead of waiting. Conversations didn't feel heavy. They didn't ask me to explain myself. Laughter returned carefully. Not loud. Not rehearsed. Just brief. And real. Music sounded different. Not as memory. But as sound. I didn't search for meaning in lyrics anymore. They didn't need to carry me. They could simply play. There were pauses in my thoughts. Not blank, but settled. Like snow after it falls. Even memories softened. They arrived without edges. No demand to revisit. No urgency to resolve. I understood then. Closure isn't a door. It's a loosening. A moment when you stop holding. And the weight doesn't fall. It just disappears. I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. I just stopped returning. And in that stillness, something opened. Not a future. Just now. I learned to trust. The quiet parts. The hours with nothing to prove. The mornings that arrived. Without expectation. I no longer measured time. By messages. Or silence. Days moved on their own. I moved with them. There was strength. In ordinary routines. Making tea. Opening windows. Folding laundry. Each action complete. On its own. No meaning borrowed. No absence highlighted. I noticed my own voice again. Not the one shaped for listening, but the one that spoke. When alone, it sounded steady, unapologetic. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was already here, breathing, living, staying. Some connections end, not with answers, but with space. And sometimes, that space is the kindness. I didn't need to be understood. I needed to be uninterrupted. And now, that is what I give myself. Every day. Quietly. Some evenings still carry echoes. A sound that feels familiar. Not painful. Just remembered. I let it pass. Like a breeze through a room. I no longer close. There is peace in not reaching back. in allowing things to stay finished. I do not rehearse conversations or imagine explanations. What was said was enough. What was unsaid also complete. I've learned that not every ending asks to be revisited. Some simply ask to be honored. Life continues in small, steady ways. A plant leaning toward light. A chair warmed by afternoon sun. A door locked without worry. I sleep better now. Not because I forgot, but because I accepted that some people are chapters, not the whole book. And that does not lessen their meaning. It gives it shape. Tonight, I rest, not waiting, not wondering, just here. And that is enough. Time softens everything, even the spaces that once felt heavy. What remains is not absence, but understanding. I no longer listen for footsteps or check the phone. The quiet now feels kind. It reminds me that I am still here, breathing, living, carrying memories without being carried by them. Some nights are meant for waiting, others for rest. Tonight is for rest, and that is enough.